For those of you who don't know, at Winterberry Group, we consult really two constituencies, the community of advertising, marketing services, and technology companies that support the practice of marketing on a global basis. And we help companies in that world, some of whom are in this room, map their business strategies, understand how their capabilities and products need to change in order to keep up with the changing world. And then we work extensively with enterprise marketers, media companies, brands, people who are doing marketing, to transform their organizations, their processes, the way they leverage the supply chain, to likewise respond to those challenges. And the way that we hear the challenges articulated have changed significantly over the last few years. There was a point not long ago where it was common for us to be called into a financial services company or a media company and be asked to support them through processes of digital transformation, sort of with the understanding that sooner or later we were moving to a world where all things would be digital, digital would be the hub, traditional media would go by the wayside. Perhaps you're familiar with that story as it existed a few years ago. And increasingly over the last few years, though digital is still an incredibly important theme to all sorts of businesses, the topic that has been driving the conversation among large businesses is really more about data. And I'd actually posit a different perspective, because data is the mechanism, data is the subject matter, the discipline around which companies are sort of structured to make change. But really the conversation is about customers and about an ongoing, to Lisa's point from before, an ongoing trend around customer centrism that is driving how businesses are looking to engage with the people obviously who are buying from them and have looking to structure their organizations internally. So I could have put up so many slides, it kills me. We do, one of the things we do is we publish research. And we've been publishing a report for the last few years in conjunction with a consortium of 20 what used to be called direct marketing associations around the world. And I say used to be because most of them now go by the moniker Data-Driven Marketing Association. Take from that what you will. And for the last 2 years, we pulled together thousands of panelists globally and asked them, what's driving your initiatives? What's driving your priorities? Is it a need to be digital? Is it a need to rationalize your media mix? Is it a need to simply measure and report on your efforts? And to a certain extent, all of those are priorities somewhere in the organization. But the number one response, several years running now, is we simply have a desire to live up to the promise that we made to our customers to respond to their needs. Talk about the conversation about Amazon a few years ago. You may be an Amazon fan, you may not be an Amazon fan, but the one piece of credit Amazon has gotten almost from the very start of the business is the notion that it has responded to the way its customers choose to interact and do business on its site. And that has distinguished it in a global marketplace. Not surprisingly, its competitors have woken up to that point. And so now what we see are looking and saying we wish to pivot that. Data, for lack of a better term, is simply the proxy for customer in their understanding. And so when we talk to these marketers, the question is, how can we better use data to understand who they are, understand their interactions across touch point, and again, to underscore Lisa's point, to orchestrate an omni-channel dialogue that cuts across all of the addressable media channels at our disposal, traditional as well as digital. Now, data, being sort of the representation of the customer and the fuel of that exchange, is not one thing. It's a great many things. And I would probably argue that folks who come from a postal, or to use the term direct marketing orientation, better understand data, its addressable use cases, and the operational infrastructure required to use it better than almost anybody else in the advertising and marketing world, because those are folks who have, depending on how you want to count, somewhere in the vicinity of 200, 250 years of experience leveraging that kind of information for marketing results. At one point data was information with names and postal addresses on index cards. It ultimately migrated to punch cards in mainframe environments and gave birth to companies like Axiom, who exist to manage all of that information so that companies understand who they do business with. Well, we live in a world now where data is still that, and much more than that, as a matter of fact, but it's also anonymous IP addresses collected from internet interactions that tell us not necessarily that Jonathan Margulies is on a specific site and moving on to another site, although it can if I'm logged in and I've permissioned the data, but can certainly tell me how anonymous users or groups of users engage and behave across interactions. And when companies, when marketers look out at all of this information, they see essentially a tremendous untapped potential to learn more about who they're doing business with, to optimize both the character, the relevance, and the bottom line value of every one of those interactions. And what they're demanding today, and what they're only seeing, I think, the very beginning of traces of success in activating is more, is the opportunity to do more and leverage more of those touch points in a sort of combined infrastructure. That is the challenge as much for folks on the purely digital side of the equation as it is for folks who come from a traditional infrastructure. But like I say, my sort of very solid belief is people who understand the basics of data management, targeting, and engaging audiences, most of whom come from a traditional direct marketing background, are better suited to lead that conversation over the next few years.